You hear it mute, you go back to receive, okay? That's what those little contacts are doing. So let's say you hook up your Dow key and you go into transmit and you hear a little bark in your receiver, okay? Hey everybody, it's Terry, and as you know, I'm a ham radio operator, and I've had some of you writing in and saying, hey, I want to get into classic AM. So I want to run a transmitter and a receiver. So how do I do that without damaging these devices and get them on the air and sound good like all those other guys? Well, I'm going to show you in some simple steps how to set this up using a Dow Key Relay, or as we call it, a TR switch, with muting so that when you turn on this monster, it doesn't blow that one up. Here we go. So for this demonstration, we're going to use a Johnson Viking 2 transmitter, a National 300 receiver. The Johnson is being controlled by VF122 VFO. We're going into a dummy load and monitoring on the Drake watt meter. So I do not have a live antenna. We're actually just going into the dummy load, which you see hiding back here. Alright? Anytime you tune up a transmitter, it is highly recommended that you use a dummy load. You do not tune your radio initially into an antenna. Number one, it irritates other operators, and number two, it does not allow your transmitter to tune properly to the load that it's looking for. So let's start with the receiver. When you're not transmitting, you want to receive, right? So here it is, the receiver's operating. Obviously I can't hear anything because I'm on a dummy load, but normally your receiver at this point is connected to the antenna, right? So you can just kind of listen to what's going on. Then you say, hey, I want to talk to that guy on that frequency. So I'm over here on, say, AM 3.885. I want to talk to the AMers, right? So I go over to my Viking, take her to CW, and then I'm going to adjust my VFO, and we're going to do what's called spotting. Okay? So if you look at my receiver, as I'm tuning the VFO dial, you see that needle? Kind of goes up and down, up and down. Right there, I'm on that frequency. So I've just spotted my transmitter to that frequency on the receiver, so I can talk to those guys. Okay? I'm going to turn off the spot mode. Now I'm back to receive. So at this point I can say, alright, I'm on the frequency, I'm going to key my microphonium, and I'm going to talk to these guys. So right now I'm putting out power. My antenna just transferred from the receiver to the transmitter, and that's why you saw the output power. But when that happened, my receiver didn't go nuts and blow the front end out because it muted it and it disconnected the antenna from the receiver and connected it to the transmitter. So let me show you the magic device that does that. Well, I've spun everything around. So this is the back of the Viking 2 and this is back of the NC300. Okay? This device right here is the magical device called the Dow Key Relay. Now there's many different styles of these relays that you can get, but this is the one that I prefer to use. You don't have to use it. Okay? What's nice about the Dow Key is obviously it couples directly to the back of your transmitter. This lead here is the antenna. Okay? This connector goes direct into your transmitter. Now if you look at the orientation of that Dow Key, you'll see this coil is facing out, and there's a reason for that. Okay? Right now the antenna is coming in and has normally closed contact that's going to this lead, which is the receive lead to the National 300. So that goes direct to the antenna input jack. Okay? Then if you look at this little lead, this is actually a 120 volt coil that's being fed off the back of the transmitter. So you got this little crystal socket. Okay? Actually, when you flip the plate or you key your microphone, if you have push to talk, you'll get 120 volts across those two little pins. This guy plugs in that gives you coil power. So when you key the transmitter, this antenna that is normally going normally close to the receiver flips. Okay, so now this opens, this closes, so now your transmitter is going to the antenna. The receiver connection is opened. And on top of that, if you look right back there, there's some little leaf switches. You see these wires? These wires go over here to your standby terminal, okay? Not the muting, but the standby. So ground and standby, okay? So what happens is, right now, for the receiver to work, it's seeing a normally closed contact here. And that's why it is receiving, okay? When you transmit, this contact here will go forward and disconnect your receiver. Hear the receiver? And opens. So that is what mutes your receiver. So the beauty of a Dow key is at the same time that it's disconnecting the antenna from your receiver, it also mutes it. So there's two levels of protection for your receiver when you're in transmit mode. There's other devices on the market that I would not really recommend. The Dow keys have been around for a long time. They are my go-to device for TR switching between a transmitter and a receiver. So I'm going to cut to this diagram for you to review. I've kind of simplified the hookup. So if you take a look at that, you'll see how the Dow key's hooked up, how it hooks to the transmitter, the lines that go to the receiver. You'll see the mute leads, okay? If you follow this simple diagram, it'll be foolproof and you'll have no issues at all, okay? Now here are some precautions. When you initially hook up your Dow key, you want to disconnect the coax going to your receiver, okay? You do not want this connected initially, because what you want to do first is hook up your transmitter, key the Dow key, make sure that your lead, your antenna lead, which in this case is going to a dummy load, is actually transferring that RF power from this port to this port. Because if you got it wired wrong and your receiver's hooked up, you can damage it, okay? The other thing you want to do is take these little leaf switches here and you want to just move it and see if you have that connected right. So when it moves, it cuts out your receiver, okay? Those are two precautions. You don't want RF power getting into your receiver and blowing out that front end, or you're going to be bringing it to D-Lab for repair. I would rather you do it right the first time. So here's the action of the TR switch when you key it. You say I've got 122 volts on that coil, okay? So obviously you don't want to be back here poking your fingers around the back of your radio without paying attention to what you're doing, or you're going to get poked. But what I want to show you is, I'm going to zero in here on the leaf switches. You can watch this action. See there? So here's a close-up on those leaf switches. So I'm receiving. You hear it mute. We'll go back to receive. Okay? That's what those little contacts are doing. So let's say you hook up your Dow key and you go into transmit and you hear a little bark in your receiver. Okay? That's because you don't have the timing right on these little contacts. Okay? So imagine when you're transmitting, you want that antenna to change over, but before that you want your receiver to mute. So if you're hearing a little bloop in your receiver, you need to adjust the spacing of these contacts so when you transmit, this breaks first, muting your receiver, then the contact internally of the Dow key closes so that your transmitter is transferring power. Then you won't hear that little chirp. It's just something I've learned over the years. So if you want the Captain Proton version of zero beating your receiver, put your receiver in sideband mode. And there it is. Okay. I can't stress enough the use of a Dow Key Relay with the external contacts rather than some of these generic devices that you're seeing out there for sale on the internet. because the Dow key allows you to physically see those contacts moving, and you can actually adjust them to make sure that your receiver doesn't bark at you like I was telling you about, right? If you buy these other devices that have like an ice cube relay inside and they switch plus do the muting, you have no adjustment. And if that device fails, it can be catastrophic because you have the RF and the muting together in one package. So just think of that failure. So the old stuff is the good stuff, right? Stick to the Dow keys. They're available for about 30 bucks out there on the internet. Best investment you ever made. Thanks for tuning in.